For a lot of people, speedrunning can be alluring, a concept that involves doing something repetitive thousands of times over, tediously awaiting the day where you can finally be done with it. Kind of like work. Since the good old days of people recording their high scores, there's been this question of, well, just how good could you do this? And as well as, why are you wasting so much time? And in most cases, how far you can theoretically push a game is much further than even the people who program the game know. Speedrunning is a passively interesting concept for everyone who's into a particular game. Even if you don't like the concept of playing something 4,000 times personally, it's interesting to know how and what and where and at what time a record was set, and what did the person think, and how did they act about a game's record, and what were they wearing, and what kind of breakfast did they eat in order to kick so much ass. And in terms of speedruns, Diablo 2 is quite unique. Pun intended, it has a really interesting formula. And when thinking of video topics that people have covered to death, nothing screams at me like, don't make a speedrun history video, you dick! So instead I sat in my ape cave, otherwise known as my gibbon lair, and I tried coming up with an original take on the speedrunning video, and I came up with this little concept. I'm going to just talk about what you as a player need to do in order to match the current world record holder. So I'll go through, analyze the tricks, which in this case is close to nothing, and then we have a little casual conversation about what physical and mental qualities you need to exhibit in this run. I'm not going through the game's whole history involving the evolution of tricks or whatever, that's for someone else to do. I'm here just to analyze this guy's hands or some shit. So, beginning quite simply, you would need to be able to read because the world record requires picking the sorceress class. This is the first point at which Diablo 2 proves to be an interesting speedrun because there's actually a ton of categories for the game, but the best time overall is definitely clocked using a source. Okay, so good, you have to be able to read, that's step one. Honestly, if you want to speedrun this game, I advise hopping off the computer, going down to the local supermarket, picking up some eggs and some other good brain foods, eat for a few weeks, and then start trying out the run yourself. So there you go, the second skill set is having eggs for every meal. There is a myriad of small skills that you need to practice, like learning how to run most efficiently, how Diablo 2 aiming works, using telekinesis liberally, an ability that lets you activate things at a distance. Additionally, I won't be mentioning builds or anything because it's one of the least changing aspects of the speedrun. Basically, you're going to have next to no power against any target, and instead can only kill bosses with any degree of speed due to static field. So beyond this little nugget of information, I won't be ever mentioning the build again. But before I start talking about the run itself, I want to give the context of the Diablo 2 speedrun. Firstly, the game has 3 difficulties with 5 acts each. There are many categories for every class and difficulty, but the world record is simply being able to beat normal act 1 through 5 the fastest. As of the recording of this video, that time is 57 minutes 33 seconds of in-game time held by the runner Indrek. You begin the game with a new character and have several tasks that are pretty standard. Reach level 20 before the ancients so that you can kill them, have a stable gold economy to buy potions and scrolls, and try not to die. So here's the physical and mental requirements for obtaining the world record in Diablo 2. For the majority of the skills, I can break them into a severely important skill set. Brain. You have to be quick on your feet because any hesitation or foolish mistakes will doom your run. Must use eyes. Eyes good for brain. In fact, Diablo 2 differs from a lot of other speedruns because there really is nothing intensely hard to perform physically. Most of the skill sets are based around having more neurons firing than the next runner. Moving on from the concept of intelligence, a very specific, non-broad, and non-stupid thing to suggest, here's some of the most important things to keep track of. Perhaps most imperative, but you need to have a lucrative gold supply because we need to juice hard. To do this, you must remember a pretty comprehensive list of things to pick up, since some items carry humongous premiums. Scepters, wands, throwing knives are all good moneymakers. Then there's stupid shit like guitars and shrunken heads that no one wants, and who can blame them? Would you want, this guy rolls up with this, you gonna buy that? So you're gonna be playing Econ Simulator 2022, so you are best off having a lot of game knowledge about what potions you need ahead of time. Thawing and antidote potions are very useful in improving your hopes of defeating numerous bosses. Stamina potions are a necessity since they make the game tolerable. Health and mana potions are good. Who'da have funk in that? So that's a whole heap of knowledge you're going to just require just to keep everything in order. Progressing forward, Diablo 2 has randomly generated maps, but they follow a program logic, so get out your cartography equipment and slap your own fucking head as you power learn all the map layouts in this game. You need to know this stuff, and since you will be crossing through just about 75 locations, give or take, that's 75 small sets of information you need to have on you at all times. Also, keep in mind the grinding game. This is an RPG, so you're going to need to level up in order to take on harder enemies. This cannot be a slow endeavor either, so more of that patented information about best locations to farm experience. In general, you only get experience from champion or unique packs. Man, I expected there to be more skills involved with this game, but it really has come down to eating more bran. Another skill that's out of your control, but is equally important, is luck. The game needs to piss out a few things in your direction. Firstly, good drops for both the aforementioned money making and then also upgrades that help you unclog the walkways, so to speak. Secondly, not bumping into horrible enemy groups is of utmost importance, which is something you can't always control. You're running along faster than any human has ever moved, and suddenly you find yourself in a janitor's closet full of glomes. And that is goodnight Vienna. Plus, you want some good fortune with bosses where they don't clean your clock in 1 second. Since your build is actually really good at killing bosses, you're going to need just a bit of time and luck to kill them. Mephisto, for example, could just shoot his mega ball at your face and that'll be that. But with all this talk about luck and brain power, you know what physical skills you are going to need? Being able to play Tetris while moving. The inventory is a bane of this run since you're going to be loading it up with things constantly. You need to have things to sell to generate revenue, and you need to have potions to keep going. Shift-click filling the belt with potions is good, and then by removing the belt, it dumps your excess potions into your inventory. This is the fastest way to fully stock up, but the only problem is that you're going to be constantly running over yourself. So get good at reorganizing constantly and make sure to allocate enough space for the quest pickups. Finally, you should be good at the game. That'd be beneficial, whether this be aiming correctly all of the time, key binding at the speed of light, not getting killed ever, Plus, knowing how and when to lure groups of enemies you don't want to deal with is a deliberate and important skill. Additionally, a very new development in the speedrun is having the ability to skip Bale's enemy waves. This has in general been one of the most difficult and tedious parts of the speedrun, and it is now skippable, but the window to doing so is complicated. So yeah, for those not in the know, this guy Bale, he's got like fucking clown syndrome or something, and he laughs all day, probably from the excessive anger or grief of you killing his whole family, but regardless, he never stops doing it. For this reason, we kill him. But when he laughs, it signifies that a new wave is about to begin. Then he casts forward a glowing orb, and you have to kill a group of minions to progress. Here's the rub, he's not actually always loaded in. Strangely enough, he has a few phases he needs to go through to summon anything, and if you leave the room and bounce in and out at the right times, you'll make him move up in his programming. Essentially, these two torches represent the edge of the room. The trick involves going in and out of the room at the correct time, basically making it so that he spawns in, but then he doesn't actually spawn the enemies, and then tricking the game into thinking that he's not spawned in anymore. It's complicated and it's hard, and this stands as the only sequence break in Diablo 2 so far, and since it's practically a series of frame-perfect entries and exities, it's not something people have reliably figured out yet. This about wraps up every skill I can define in Diablo 2 speedrunning. When coming up for this video series idea, I was thinking like Super Mario Bros. Execution and how many button presses, hard to perform tricks and stuff there were, Then this game is basically Simon Says, but there's 45 buttons to keep track of. Lots of memorization, planning, and just a healthy bit of hand utilization, and the Diablo 2 world record could be yours. And then after the baby mode, we can start talking about the Chad Hell Barbarian hardcore speedrun. That'll put some hair on your crotch.